All right. Okay. Now that we have connected our Redux store to our Redux, let's go back to again to our store provider. Okay. So let's come to this function again, user function. So to dispatch the actions that you have set up in your reducer, that means we have our Redux reset action and our set authentication action. You have to use the dispatch function that is provided by Redux. So inside our store, we are importing the store. You can say store.reducer. That means the store also has access to the dispatch function. So if you do not want to use the store, you can just simply import this dispatch function standalone. So let's say const dispatch. Sorry. Dispatch. You can call the useDispatch hook from React Redux. Okay. So now you can call all of your functions in your inside this dispatch hook. Okay. Okay, so you can use your dispatch function from here. So this dispatch function, whatever action we dispatch from inside this dispatch function, will go to our reducer, and the action that is passed to our dispatch will be executed. That means if we are sending set authenticated inside our auth slice, this set authentication function will be action will be called, and whatever functionalities we set up in our in this function, mostly we want to manage our states, will be executed. So inside that, inside dispatch, I am sending an action called verify user, right? So let's see, where is this verify user coming from? Okay, so our verify user is not coming from any Redux store, right? You can see there is no slice, no store, nothing. So where is this verify user coming from? And we are sending it in our dispatch function. That means it should be a action, right? A Redux action, right? It is not. It is actually a create async thunk function. So what is create async thunk and why do we need to use it? Let's explore that. Okay, let me close that. So what is Redux Thunk? Redux Thunk is a function that accepts a Redux action type, string, and a callback function that should return a promise. That means actually Redux Thunk is a function. It will take a action creator, action type string, and a action creator that will create your action. That means Redux Thunk will ultimately create a similar action like this that you can handle in your Redux store. But why are you going to use Redux Thunk, right? So as you can see, Redux only manages our synchronous functions or synchronous states. That means you can manage the states of Redux synchronously. So if you want to manage any asynchronous function, that means your stored data is coming from APIs, right? After your API call, you do not have to use Thunk, but you can simply make your API call, or any kind of if you want to make any kind of API request, you can do it in your with your simple function, and you can make actions inside your reducer function, and you can just dispatch those functions. So why use Thunk? So Thunk is actually the word Thunk is in programming context. Thunk is a piece of function or code that is going to be executed with a delay. That means you have any asynchronous functionality, Redux Thunk is that. And if you also want, so a Thunk action creator, it will return a Thunk action creator that will run the promise callback and dispatch the lifecycle actions based on the return promise. Okay, great. And this abstract the standard recommended approach for handling async request lifecycles. Okay, so to understand async Thunk, and as you can see, async Thunk, it is very complicated to, and we are setting up async Thunk, and then we go to our auth slice, then we are setting up in our extra users, right? So let me to show you or make you understand this better, let me close all of this, right? Okay, let's close all of this. So let's go to our Redux, and inside our features, let's make another folder. Okay, let's name it test, right? And inside test, we want to make a test slice. Let's say test slice dot js. And inside test slice, we want to call we going to need an initial state, right? So const initial state. Inside our initial state, we can say test data. Okay, let's keep it as an empty array. Sorry, wrong syntax. So after that, I want to create a slice. Let's name it test slice. And then I can say create slice. Okay, let's import it from Redux Toolkit. Okay, so inside create slice, the first parameter will be the name, right? What is the name of the action? So make sure you do not have any conflicting names in your store. So if I go to our store, we have auth, user, and general. We do not have any test. So let's name it test. And then we want to call our initial state. And after that, we want to add our reducers. Okay, sorry. So inside our reducers, I want to what I want to get is I want to get test data from our API, any other API, and I want to set up in set it up in our test data state, right? So let's say set test data, and we want the state as our first parameter, and we also want the action. Okay. Inside our action, okay, so I have to use the colon syntax, sorry. So when I dispatch this action, inside this action, I will send the test data, okay, as payload. So I want to get that data from our action.payload, and I want to set it up in our test data state, right? So it is very simple. I want to say state.test data equals to action.payload, and if I don't get any action.payload, I'm just going to set it up in our empty string, so we do not have any type related issues. So after that, I want to import the action, right? So I want to say const set test data, and I'm going to export this from our test slice dot actions. So this will export it as actions. Okay, so let's say export. Now that we have created an action, right? Set test data action. And we also want to make a reducer and export it. So we can say export default test slice dot reducer. Okay, so our reducer setup is complete. So now we have to add it to our store. So let's say test, and we want to import the test slice. Okay, where is it? Okay. So our test slice is complete. Let's say if I did everything correct. Initial state, reducers. Okay, looks good. So after that, I want to get the data, right? So where can I get the data? If you want to test your APIs, let's go to JSON placeholder. JSON placeholder, not that. If we search on JSON placeholder API, okay, so this JSON placeholder API will provide you some API data that you can test in your application. So if I run this script here, as you can see, I get this data. I can just simply take this API and test it in our code. So I'm going to get all of the data. Okay, so I have to get posts. So this is our API. So I'm going to test this with our API. So inside our pages, let's create a page called test, and inside that index.js. Okay. So inside our test function, I want to make an API call to get the data. Okay, let's do that. Let's take our useBug function. We do not want any dependencies. Okay. So after that, let's use Axios dot get and then our API. And after that, let's console log our result first. And to say what we are getting from the API. All right, then we can add our catch block to handle any errors. Okay, so our API, okay, this will give an error. I have to console it. Sorry. Okay, so our setup is complete. So let's go to our UI and let's go to this route. We do not get any useDispatch function. Okay, we got an error. Oh, sorry, my bad. So, okay, great. Now we have got an error. So let's explore why you got that error. So as we can see, I am calling this dispatch function. Focus on it. Where are we getting this useDispatch function? We are getting it from our React Redux. That means this component is not wrapped in a provider, React Redux provider, right? This provider, this component is not this hook call is not wrapped in our provider. Okay, so now if I want to use this, it gives us error that you cannot call the useDispatch unless it is wrapped in provider. So we cannot make that call in from here. So if we want to use this patch, we have to use it inside our provider function. That means inside our provider wrapper, we can use useDispatch in our children. So I will just go back to store.dispatch. Where is it important? Okay. We can say store.dispatch. Oh, sorry. All right. Should be fixed. Okay, we are not importing it. Okay, now it should work. All right. You saw the problem, right? Okay. Now that we have solved the problem, let's go back to our test route that we have created for testing our APIs. Okay, so this is our test. If I inspect now, let's go to console. Okay, so what are we getting? Console is not a function. What do you mean? Oh, sorry, my bad. I didn't log. I just said console. Okay. Okay, so now you can see we got hundreds of data from our API. Now, let's say for some reason not we want to load this data when we first hit our home route. Let's say for some reason we do not want to do that, but for this testing we want to do that. So you want to keep it in your Redux store, right? So when the user comes to the test route, the data is ready. So to do that, you can now call the dispatch function. As this test route is wrapped inside our provider, I can say dispatch use dispatch. Okay, so I should be able to call it from here. So now I can dispatch this action that I created in our test slider, this set test data. Okay, so this test data will take a parameter, okay, argument that is we're going to send the response dot data. Okay. Okay, so now we are dispatching this action set tester data, which will take this data with it, and it will come to a reducer and say that, okay, I have got some data, do whatever you want to do with it, and our reducer will set our state, the test data, with this new data, and if we fail to provide any payload or any information, it will just set it to a empty string, empty array. So okay. So now that we have set it up in our store, let's reload again. Okay. So as you can see in our browser console, I have this Redux toolkit, Redux dev tool, right? Okay, what is happening? Okay. So inside our Redux dev tool, we have our actions, our state, our differences. We can trace the tree and everything. And in our state, if we come to our state, as we can see, we have a new reducer or new state, that is test. If we go inside test, as you can see, under test data, we have all of our user data now, right? This is our test data. Okay, so now we have got all our test data in our Redux, and this is why you can use the Redux dev tool. You can manage, you can see all your states from here. You can see the component tree, you can see it as a chart, or if you want to see it as raw, you can do all that from here. So now we have made the API call and successfully stored the data in our Redux store. Okay. So now this is a standard process of calling our API data. So as you can see, this is a simple API call, right? This is just making an API call, get API call, and setting up some data in our store. So for this, you do not actually need async thunk. It is just making a simple API call that is dispatching a simple action. But you might have some API calls that are complicated. For example, we have our we have our after login, we have our verify function, verify action that we are calling, that is verify user. So inside this function, you have to handle some other functionalities like setting up the user, setting up the user information, is user authentication, is user message is complete. You also have to set up cookies and some other functionalities. So if you want to do that, you have to dispatch multiple actions. For example, you have to dispatch like 4 to 5 actions from here, right? So you have to not just dispatch these, you also have to create all these all these actions from here. So to make all these API calls and handling asynchronous data simpler, we have our Redux Thunk. So we can use Redux Thunk to make our API calls, and Redux Thunk is integrated with our Redux store. So all of this data, and after the API call, whatever we are doing, we can handle it directly in our Redux store. So we do not have to make any API, make any stores, make any actions. We do not have to make any action creators. We just simply make the API call and send the loading state, the pending state, and the rejected state to our store, and our reducer will handle all of that. So as you can see from here, where is it? Store provider. Okay, here I am just simply dispatching a verify user function, right? This is the verify user function, and it is making the API call and sending the response to our reducer. And if we go to our user, where is user? Okay, so if we go to our user slice, we are handling all of this data here, right? So you might have to make multiple API, multiple action creators, or dispatch multiple actions to manage your state, but you do not have to do that here. You can just implement Redux async thunk and send all the fulfilled state from here. You can manage your state from here. So it makes the code simpler, and you do not have to console log multiple steps, and you do not have to debug multiple steps from here in your Redux store, in your API calls. You can simply handle it in your reducers. And so to make this API call, so I have just simply used it with our Axios. So how can you use it with Redux Thunk, right? So for that, let's go to our test slice and let's create another file, test async actions. So inside that, I can say, okay, what is the naming convention? Do login. Okay, let's name it set test API data. You can name it whatever you want. And now we can say create async thunk. Okay, so now this create async thunk will it's provided from Redux Toolkit, so you do not have to understand Redux, install Redux async thunk separately, and Redux Toolkit already actually gives you a hook that will wrap up all the Redux thunk functionality. And if you hover over here, you have to enter some type prefix and you have to enter the payload creator. So okay, let's sorry, is it okay? Okay, so you have to give the name to your action type, right? So if it is a naming convention to use the reducer's name with it, so we are saying test dot save, let's say save test data. Okay. So the other parameter is going to be a callback function that is going to return a promise. So inside the callback function, we have our all the data or the parameters that you send data with your function. So let's say test data, and we also have the Thunk API. So this will make API call, right? So we have to make it a async function, and inside that we can set our test data and our Thunk API. So test data is if your API call is a post API call and it depends on some data. Okay, right? So our API call is simply a get API call and do not need depend on any data. So we actually do not need this parameter. And our Thunk API actually has access to our Redux, some of the features of our Redux store. That means Thunk API can Thunk API can call the Redux store actions and actually change the Redux store's state from here. So for Redux Thunk, after that, inside the Thunk API, we can simply try our API call. We say try, and we can say exhaust.get. Okay, let's say const res. Okay, exhaust. We have to use the await keyword. Okay, after we get the data, if we get response.data, we can simply send it as response.data. And if we do not get any data, sorry, we have to return it. And if we do not get any data, we can just return, let's say, a empty array. And if we catch any error, let's say error, sorry, this is the wrong syntax. Get error, I can simply log out the error. Or if I want to send any message to our lifecycle, Redux API call lifecycle, I can just call the Thunk API that will return Thunk API dot reject. Okay, Thunk API dot. Okay, let me copy it from their documentation. Okay, we can call the Thunk API dot reject with values function, and we can actually send data to our store, and it is going to be handled in our rejected lifecycle. I'm going to talk about lifecycle later. I can just say I can just return the error. Okay. So after that, I'm going to export this async thunk function from here. Export default. Sorry. Okay. So I am exporting the